Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Delivery Day FD03 Feature Frenzy.
Feature Frenzy. We're trying to make it super obvious that we have new features for you all the time. Actually, not all the time, every 7 to 8 weeks or so.
Yeah, that's true.
But growing up, that's not what I used to have when I was a kid. But now
that's a constant stream as far as I'm concerned.
Every 7 to 8 weeks.
Yep.
Which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and we have a great list of stuff, actually. They have not slowed down at all.
We do.
We do.
My name is Sean O'Neill. This is Jesse Sprague. Welcome to Delivery Day, which is, we should say, on YouTube if you want to watch all the enhancements along with us, which I would say is the preferred mode of consuming this content.
Preferred mode? I prefer Spotify, which is the other option.
There we go. So if you're listening in the car, you got that. We usually will call out areas where, hey, if it's like you really need to look at this, you can always just, hey, listen to the first half on Spotify, go back, rewatch something on YouTube. So yeah, whatever you want to do.
And of course, you could always pull up the video on Spotify as well if you were so inclined.
Very true. So today, what do we got? We got about 15 new enhancements.
I didn't actually count them up. Is it exactly 15?
I think it's exactly 15. Okay. So exactly 15.
Sean counted.
I did. Exactly 15 here for what I would say is the July release of SOLIDWORKS, right? So it's the third instance of, or the third sort of edition of 2025 that's just come out. We have 15 new enhancements.
Yeah, and of course there are a few more we cherry-picked.
Yeah, a few more we cherry-picked as well.
Yeah.
And some fun segments. So let's get started. So one of the first fun segments, last episode, if you guys remember, we featured a wedding among community members. Yeah, true story. So a wedding among community members that was published on LinkedIn, where they became aware. I don't know if they became aware of each other, but they sort of connected through 3D experience, which was fascinating to me, as well as you.
It was, yes.
This one, we're actually featuring another member of our community who's not getting married, at least that I know of. Yeah, sure. And his name is Danny Lum. So Danny is a SOLIDWORKS user. What you're seeing here is a project that he created. I'm not sure if you've seen this before, Jesse.
I have not.
So what it is, and this is fully designed in SOLIDWORKS. I think every part except for wires, for example, that he has, every single part, gear, pin, everything was made was 3D printed and modeled in SOLIDWORKS. So he shows in the YouTube short, which is what I pulled this from. He shows that he used a design library to basically pull in little gears and different components that he's commonly using, and once again 3D printing. But essentially, what this would do, this assembly that he's created, is it'll take in the pins and it'll re-rack them. So it collates all the pins, and then through a sort of conveyor system, it then picks and places them back together.
That's so cool.
It's very cool. So
I'm always impressed, if nothing else, by people who have the patience to print projects of this scale. I print something that's like a 15-hour print, and I'm like, I don't have patience for this. Granted, I have a relatively old printer in terms of a printer, so it's a little bit on the slow side, but printing something of this scale, I can't even imagine having the patience for it. I want it done, and I want it done now. I'm impatient.
Yeah, it's pretty intricate. So you guys see this as B-roll, but one of the reasons why I selected this short, despite it having hundreds of thousands of views or whatever, it's pretty remarkable in that way. That's how I became aware of it, is because I recently got the chance to talk to Danny, and you will too, next month on SOLIDWORKS Live Design, our other streaming series, as he will be the featured guest, the featured presenter, going through different sort of elements of mechanism design and assembly design in SOLIDWORKS. So very excited for that. Be sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel so you can stay tuned and get an alert when that episode is published and scheduled. So very, very excited.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah. So Jesse, do you want to get into the enhancements? We are front loading a lot of these. I would say, I would say we have my two personal favorites first.
I agree.
So yeah, let's get into it.
I agree. We'll give the good stuff away first, but yeah, sure. SOLIDWORKS now automatically recognizes nuts, bolts, and washers based solely on their geometry. You can now get new cursor icon that confirms the fastener recognition, as well as automatic mating with a simple drag and drop. Now that sounds too good to be true.
Boy, do I love automatic mating.
Man. So now we're not talking about toolbox.
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
And this is an area where I said I'll shout these out. Like, you really should watch these. This is an area where you would see that in a demo, right?
Yeah.
Because our friend Mark, our colleague Mark, actually shows he drags in a fastener that, say, he's downloaded from the internet, and it's a step file, right? So very neat. That was one of the most, I think, sort of impactful, and you can see he's dragging it right from Windows Explorer.
Yeah.
It's like, I love those sorts of demos because you get tips within the tips. But yeah, there's nothing special necessarily about these SOLIDWORKS files, and once again, they aren't even necessarily SOLIDWORKS files that you're using.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it could be imported files. This is one that I would not believe if I hadn't seen / used it myself. Right.
Yeah.
Like how would it? I still don't even know exactly how it does it. Like so it's identifying this looks like a fastener. Right, is what it's doing. It's figuring out this looks like a fastener, and if it is a fastener, then I know what kind of mates to apply to it, and it will then do that for you automatically. I find adding fasteners to be one of the most irritating parts of building an assembly, just because it's just repetitive work, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing over and over and over again. Even when you're using some quicker methods, like you've got the peg mates, we've got drag and drops, control select. There are so many good ways to speed the process up, profile center mate, but it still just takes forever because you've got so many of them to do. Even if you're using the most efficient method possible, there are generally hundreds, potentially thousands of fasteners throughout an assembly, depending on the size of your assembly. So adding in all of those little bits is a real time consuming part of the process. So anything like this where you can just drag and drop it regardless of what you're using is really cool. There are, obviously you work with companies online that are selling hardware. You can usually download directly from those sites, pull down the hardware that you're using. Now, if you're using a combination of toolbox and fasteners that you purchased, that always gets complicated. You've got to mix and match. It really doesn't matter as much anymore because now you can make use of very quick methods of getting those in place regardless of what it is.
I think there are a number of enhancements too in this release. I was kind of thinking about as you were talking and as we were showing the demo or the vignette, where a lot of times when you download fasteners, they'll have modeled threads. Sometimes that's preferable, sometimes it's not. Right. A lot of times strictly for performance reasons in SOLIDWORKS, we usually say don't model the threads because you're just adding to the edge and phase counts. And again, you can have hundreds of these, say screws or bolts, and you don't necessarily need that level of detail. As you get into larger assemblies, it really starts to bog things down. The assembly performance tab or assembly visualization will kind of show you can show different graphical triangles or graphical triangle counts. A lot of times if I talk to people about this, they'll be like, wow, this is a problem. Yeah. And then you suppress all of them, and then all of a sudden things are like moving a lot more fluidly, et cetera. So this doesn't necessarily, I know it makes it a lot easier to work with those sorts of fasteners that you might download from like an online catalog. But still, best practices still apply there, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great point. And with SOLIDWORKS, using configurations or just, any of those methods that you're using, it is very quick. And a lot of times what I'll do, even if I've downloaded it, I'll just go back in and extrude over the threads, have a configuration
that's a great method. Yeah.
Just extrude over it, put a cosmetic thread on it, and then I'll just leave the threads in there as a, just as a configuration in case I need them, right? But then you don't have to load it in the assembly.
Very cool. So I mentioned we're pretty much front loading, I think, some of my personal favorites. There's a lot of good stuff to get to here. But this next one, you might remember 7 or 8 weeks ago when we last had an episode of SOLIDWORKS Delivery Day. We talked about a brand new feature at the time, once again, 7 or 8 weeks ago, called auto-generate drawings. So that the first sort of introduction of that feature of the button to click to automatically generate drawings from your parts or your assemblies was 7 or 8 weeks ago, but it's been massively enhanced since, and that's exactly what we're going to get into today. So at the top here, so once again, in 2025, FD02, which again came out about 7 or 8 weeks ago, we introduced automated drawing generation, and it was a great start. It was a great start to a mode that we have now enhanced here with FD03. We've enhanced the capability with recognition of hole geometry, section views, better arrangement of views and annotations, and best fit sheet size, which is truly remarkable. I think if you look at the demo, you can see some really good examples. It gets you potentially, I love these because it's a very riskless process. Click the button and it'll do something, and you might like it, you might not. Maybe it gets you 60 to 70% of the way there. And one thing I love, and I'm not sure, I think Mark made this demo as well. Mark
Yes,
Peterson,
I
who
think so,
makes
yeah.
a lot of great SOLIDWORKS demos, just showing how it works. One thing he shows is that he does it as a batch process. So he goes right into the assembly tree and he selects multiple components, goes right into the shortcut bar, selects auto generate drawings, and it makes a task in the task pane whereby it's making individualized drawings for the selected components, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, that alone is cool.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. And then, you consider, okay, so once it's created those, he's going in and he's making adjustments as necessary. So maybe in a given view or set of views, he's changing the display state of the views. Maybe he's changing the configuration that's in use. Maybe he's changing the view size. So this isn't a case where if it doesn't give you the perfect output per your preferences, you just have to scrap it and never use it again. You might have to make some edits. I kind of almost think of it, Jesse, as having like a skilled intern or contractor who is just working for you in the background. And maybe you have to review their work, sure. And maybe that you have to make changes and you have to advise some things afterwards. But still, it's doing a lot of work for you, and it takes a minute.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think we talked about this when the feature came out on the last show for FD02 a little bit too. But I like these, engineers add, I think a lot of people take pride in their drawings, and rightly so, right? So I think sometimes people would maybe shy away from a feature like this. It's like, I like my drawings the way I like them. I like everything clean. It's the way that engineers communicate,
Sure.
right? So to take some control out of that, I could see having some resistance to it. But and in the last show, we talked about how it isn't really that. It's not going to make a finished drawing the way that you would make it or your company makes it, but it takes out all of those little steps at the beginning that are just the repetitious things that you're just getting things on the sheet, basically, that you're not adding any value as the engineer making that drawing. You're just picking and placing things, right? You take all of that stuff out of it, then you can add value where you're adding the value as the engineer making that drawing to communicate the things that you want to communicate. So I love stuff like that because it takes out the stuff that you're wasting your time on and lets you focus on the stuff that you're not wasting your time on and adding value.
I'm just thinking of so many conversations that I've had with other SOLIDWORKS users where, and it's a common complaint of, I don't want to make drawings anymore. Yeah. So I officially challenge you to just try it out. If you've ever bemoaned making a drawing, just click the button and try it and see if you like it.
Yeah.
That's my official challenge to you.
It's a great call to action.
Yeah, do something about it.
Do something about it. Give it a try.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's the same for both of those features. They're grouped well together, right? Just taking out the trivial work that nobody wants to do.
100%.
I like it. All right, well, should we move on? Tree display. Let's hear a recap of this one first, and we'll go into it. So solid spot for this. We've got tree display options have been customizable for many years. However, these settings were saved into the assembly file itself. New for FD03, these options are now available as an override in system options. This puts you in control of how your trees are displayed, not at the mercy of what is saved into the file. Now, I really like this one because I do tend to customize my tree view, and I think Mike Sandy did
this one is literally your SOLIDWORKS screen.
Yeah.
Like it's customized to the nth degree.
So Sean and I are chuckling if you're just listening along and you're not watching
every
the demo.
Detail. No detail spared in
No
terms
detail.
of characteristics of a component in a tree.
No detail spared. So
the description, the name.
Mike, who did this demo, did a funny job of basically turning on everything that you could turn on in the tree, just to show exaggerated of how long you could really get things and how cluttered your tree could end up. And that's not me. I actually go the other way. I turn off as much as I can turn off.
Yeah.
I want it as clean as possible. And a lot of people don't realize that you can actually control that, right? You're not stuck with the defaults of what gets shown in your tree.
Very long time I didn't know that.
Yeah. And even if you're using just simple controls in the settings, like the one that we added probably a long time ago at this point, but to turn off names that are not customized or added, right? So if you can turn off names for the default, the common default that you see in there, right? You've got default config, default display
Everything's
state,
default.
Everything's default. That doesn't add any value, right? So there's a checkbox and you can turn those off. That's not part of these settings.
Sure.
But just in terms of customizing your tree, even if you just do simple things like that, or turning on the comment indicator. We were talking about comments for a couple of our previous shows. just being able to tune that information to what it is you want to see is part of the benefit of being able to control that. But it always got saved into the assembly. So whoever is saving the assembly, you're kind of either fighting each other or you're just dealing with whoever saved the file with that information or that view, essentially. Now you can set it as your system settings. So you can say, this is how I always like to see my tree. Just override whatever was there with the information that I want to see. And then you'll always get the view that you want. It's kind of like making a custom view in a shared sheet or something like that, right?
Personally, I think it makes more sense as a system option. I don't know about you guys. Let us
Totally
know in the comments if you have an opinion there or preferred practice now that we have an option in FD03, as we've been stating. Yeah, it just feels like something where you'd want to sort of ubiquitously have that experience for yourself.
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe what others might like.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually kind of like that we started the other way, because there might be certain cases where it makes sense to set an assembly for a certain view, but it's nice to be able to say, no, I want to see it in my view that I always use as well.
Sure. This one that we're getting into now, which is called Selective Open, I feel like even the title, I remember when we first started discussing this internally, Selective Open, as it relates to SOLIDWORKS files, a lot of ears perked up. My ears perked up because we're all opening files, right? Especially larger files. This will no doubt be a game changer. So
no doubt, that's a bold prediction.
Yeah. So imagine, and a lot of us don't have to imagine, but like imagine needing to tweak just one small portion of a massive assembly, but having to wait while SOLIDWORKS loads the entire thing, every bolt, every subassembly, every detail, just to get to it at all. Well, Selective Open solves that. It lets you open just the parts you care about based on filters like proximity and other metadata, so you can work faster and more efficiently.
I was going to say, you interrupted yourself there, but I was going to say, I don't have to imagine that. We've been doing that for the past 30 years, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of you don't have to imagine that. I think this is, to speak very overarchingly in terms of the direction of the software, I think this is an area where even in some of the other enhancements that we'll soon talk about, we're seeing loading cycles considered differently. What I mean by that is, let's say you're using SOLIDWORKS 2026, SOLIDWORKS 2016, whatever. For years, it was, let me just load everything. And then once we've loaded everything, regardless of when you may need to access it, then you can start zooming in and out and rotating. You're literally doing anything other than just waiting for it to load. So we've been using this term lately in some areas, and I think this is more of a generalized sort of software term of lazy loading, wherein you're loading just the data that is needed for a given task or application upfront, and then loading more data as needed. So Selective Open is actually, and you would see this in the demo if you watch this on YouTube, effectively what you're doing is you are making a sort of component set from an assembly. Now you can do this with any assembly, but particularly with large assemblies, as we see with the Traca here, it's a bit more impactful. So what we're seeing in the demo here is we have a set of piping, and based on the offset proximity from the piping, we are sort of grabbing other components that may be surrounding it, right? And you think about different sort of applications within assembly editing and structure, right? A lot of times, naturally, when you have a component, the neighboring components are the components that you're going to add mates to or measure distances to and from, right? Because they may be in some sort of subsystem within, say, the vehicle, in this case, the camper. So you can do it with offset distances. You can do it by volume, component volume. You can make a filtered subset of components, which is what we're talking about here, through different characteristics, different properties in the model or overall data set. And then you save that within 3D Experience. Now, I should say, I feel like it's always important to say this, Jesse, that if you've purchased SOLIDWORKS anywhere near recently, like, you can do this.
Yeah,
like this filtering capability, you can do it on any PC in a browser. You can save it out for your fellow coworkers, and then they drag and drop the filtered sort of view of the assembly into SOLIDWORKS, and then you can do all the things that I mentioned with it. So it's not like a configuration. It's not a new display state. It's just a different mode of loading certain components, so you're not loading a full-on camper, every time you need to do something, say, within like the little piping setup.
Yeah, this is really, really cool. I mean, obviously, this is a totally new way of working. Almost.
It is.
So I've been doing a lot of this recently. We're prepping our data set for the 2026 release, which I'm not going to reveal who it is.
That's well underway.
It's well underway. Yeah. I'm not going to reveal who it is, but it's a pretty cool data set.
Pretty big one.
Fairly large assembly too. And so I typically use large design review mode, but it's exactly what you said before too, right? You load the whole thing up. It loads pretty quick in large design review mode, fortunately. But then you load the whole thing up and then go hunting through the assembly to find the thing that you want to work on, open that up, and then you still got the whole top level assembly open, albeit in large design review mode, but you've got the top level assembly open while you're, messing about with the things that you want to mess about with, save those, close those, or whatever, and then do it again. I really like this because this just isolates it right to, this is what I want to zero in on and work on. I just need to open that. And then you can do what you want to do, and you've only got to worry about the associated files. The proximity thing, though, is probably the coolest thing to me, because that adds some smarts that I wouldn't have even thought to add, I don't think, in this process. And that you're totally right. Most of the time that you're trying to fit something in or whatever, you're working on the component and the handful of things that are nearby that it's got to fit within. So that's a really cool option that I wouldn't have even thought of off the bat as an opening filter anyway. You just kind of do it in the background of your head, right? I'll just grab these, and these, or grab this subassembly or whatever. But to have only the things that are physically nearby open, it's a really cool concept.
We should say as well, within the vignette, within the demo, you see this. When you open up the filtered view of the assembly in SOLIDWORKS, you are given a sort of ribbon on the top of your command manager area, which is that top area where you have all your buttons, more or less. And it says that you have loaded the assembly in a filtered assembly state.
Yeah.
So there is that sort of identifier. Now, there are a lot of buttons and menus, so you might lose track of that. That's one downside, but it does at least tell you that you are in a filtered assembly state. And I think it's important to talk about what a filtered assembly is and isn't.
Sure.
This isn't a replacement, for example, of assembly configurations.
Yeah, good point.
Right. This isn't even, for example, display states is another good example of something it is not a replacement for.
Yeah.
Like if you're making a drawing of an assembly, like what we're talking about here, right? If you're making a drawing of an assembly, you can recall display states of that assembly to show in views, which are sort of lighter weight modes if you were to compare it to a configuration of things suppressed and unsuppressed and mates loaded and not loaded and stuff. Same with configurations, right?
Yep.
The assembly in different movement states, etc. So yeah,
that's a good point. You could probably now use each of those options in a more targeted way, I suppose.
I agree.
Because a lot of times people would use those maybe not the way that they were intended, just to try to mimic maybe some of this functionality. But now that you don't have to do that, you can use this just sort of as your working mode, your day-to-day opening methodology, and then just use your configurations and display states for purpose like what you described.
Exactly. I'd also say it doesn't necessarily replace large design review mode, which you mentioned a bit earlier. And we've made a lot of enhancements to large design review mode over the past couple major releases, for sure. Not only to itself in terms of what it's capable of, but also how it integrates within systems like SOLIDWORKS PDM. So a lot of enhancements there. So definitely check that out if you haven't looked at it. Recently, we've made it so that you can do interference detection within large design review mode,
right,
where a lot of the information of the model that takes a long time to calculate for SOLIDWORKS is not loaded when you open large design review mode. It's largely for review.
Yeah.
You can measure components, take cross sections of components and assemblies. So quite a lot you can do. You can also view mates. You can't necessarily start making them, and that's you're just in the assembly environment at that point.
Yeah, you can do a lot of interrogation.
Yeah, a lot of interrogation.
In large design review. And in some cases, this wouldn't apply. Like if you were working on maybe like a plant layout or something like that, you might still need to just see the whole thing and figure out where things are going, globally within the system. So a large design review would be more appropriate in some of those cases too. But yeah, great point.
Sure. So if you are thinking about using 3D Experience to manage your projects, even if it's just you or it's you and your coworkers, that's one great reason to do it, because you're able to use the sort of selective open functionality.
Yeah.
Now, if that does apply to you, if you are someone that's using 3D Experience to manage your projects, to even make sure that you have the latest and greatest in terms of the FDs of SolidWorks, such as those of you who are using 3D Experience SolidWorks, which that is the general characterization of your usage there. You know that, or I hope you know at this point, that you can go offline if you need to. There's a button switch where basically you can tell SolidWorks, hey, I'm going to go offline for a while. I have to catch a flight, or I have to go to a customer site, or I'm going to a coffee shop, whatever it is. So you've been able to tell SolidWorks for a long time when you're using 3D Experience SolidWorks that you need to go offline. But as we know, and as we talked about,
it just takes your license.
It just takes your license, yeah. So, but as we know, right, and as we talked about 7 or 8 weeks ago during the previous Delivery Day episode, which I believe is called Workflow Wonders, you can still check it out on YouTube and Spotify. We've now been designing more experiences for those unplanned occasions. So unplanned offline mode. So last time we caught up here on YouTube and Spotify, it was really the first of several steps to make that experience much better for you in those cases. So for example, in that instance, I think we were talking about and showing cases where you would move to launch SolidWorks and SolidWorks was not able to retrieve a license, right, because you were offline in some capacity, or communication couldn't happen between, sort of your host, right, your PC and the license server, for example, within 3D Experience. We've now expanded that for mid-session applications, right, which is what we're talking about with FD03 here in July, wherein if you're working, as you said, on a project, on some files, and all of a sudden the Wi-Fi goes out, or you can't, for whatever reason, connect to 3D Experience for, whatever reason, you're now covered in those situations where, your files are the files that you already have local. You can continue working on them until you are able to regain that connection. So I think this is great. It gives you that sort of assurance, right? It gives you that assurance that you expect from desktop it now is able to extend itself to your cloud connected workflows as well.
Yeah, and just to mention too, if you had just a quick blip or something, it's not going to keep switching you into offline mode, right? It will try, I think, 5 times or something to reconnect to the server. If it can't on the final attempt and says, okay, something has gone wrong here, then you can switch into offline mode. So you're not going to get constantly triggered with every little blip of your internet or something like that. There's a little wait period where it tries to figure out what's going on, and then at that point it says, okay, well, something has gone wrong with your connection, and you can go offline.
Awesome. So we just went through 5 of 15 enhancements. I loved this slate of 5. We have some really exciting ones, more on a collaborative end, coming up in just a moment here. But Jesse, let's go to a commercial break that features its own enhancement.
Ooh, like that.
This episode of SolidWorks Delivery Day is brought to you by SolidWorks Visualize. SolidWorks Visualize is your go-to tool for transforming CAD data into stunning, photo-quality images, animations, and interactive content, fast. Whether you're pitching a product, building marketing assets, or getting stakeholder buy-in, Visualize lets you tell the full story before a single part is made. It's included with SolidWorks Professional and Premium if you're on active subscription, and also comes with 3D Experience SolidWorks Professional and Premium. With real-time ray tracing, AI-powered denoising, and simple drag-and-drop materials, it's never been easier to bring your ideas to life, visually and impactfully.
We're back, brought to you by Visualize. Hey.
Yeah,
I like that.
Who made that enhancement?
I didn't even have anything to do with putting that in as our brought to you by, but I did make the enhancement though.
I thought it would be good. Yeah, part splitting, new enhancement in FD03.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty awesome. Again, I've already been using that quite a bit for our prepping for 2026.
Very nice.
So right into the workflow again.
Yeah,
you approved.
You use Visualize more than anyone I know, and so if you're finding good use value out of it organically, then that's good for me. So
if the show is now brought to you by Visualize, then does that mean I can tell our fine listeners that if they're not using Visualize, they're not supporting the show and we're going to get canceled?
Not supporting our sponsors. Our sponsors, ourselves.
Use Visualize. or we're going to get canned.
Yeah.
I think so. if I can get on my soapbox or my prop of the day box,
Your red gift box.
SolidWorks Visualize is criminally underused.
I would agree.
Criminally
But
underused.
you're fighting, as people say, when you're maybe fighting a fight at times that is unwinnable. I'm just kidding. You're fighting the good fight.
Fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
Visualize is not as hard to use as people think, and you can do awesome stuff with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely awesome stuff.
We've extended the ad.
We
Everyone.
have. We've extended it, and I might just continue extending it for the rest of the episode. However,
Hey man, we don't have a third mic for our new guest here. What's
do
this?
not.
What do we got here?
We have our. Whoop! I just bumped my mic as you say that with the box. I don't know what this is. I've been told
It's our pop the top prop of the day.
it is that. It is that, but I don't know what the prop is.
Yeah, they don't tell us.
I've been told that it's fragile. I have not been given a dollar value, so I don't know if I'm properly insured for this.
Yeah,
it's going to be on film when I break it.
Producer Ian. I was saying producer Ian.
Producer
right there.
Ian.
Look at him. You can't see him.
We can see him.
No, but producer Ian always tells us that we shouldn't look at the prop.
Right.
And I listen to everything he says all the time. And this one is a bit heavy, a bit heavier than most.
It does have
most. We've done this twice.
All two of them have been very light.
Yeah. But he has reinforced the idea that, or the notion rather, that it is very fragile.
It's breakable.
It's very breakable. So
right.
that's why you're doing it. I'm not.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I figured. All right. Are we ready? Are we ready?
And we're ready.
Am I Daffy the Duck?
Yes.
Whoa. Okay. This looks really cool, but I don't know. Oh man, how do we get it out of here? Somebody help!
It's gonna break. Oh wow!
Oh, is this Z makes these, right? Does she put this together?
Yeah. So I
So
see.
it's a wooden model.
Yeah, it's a wooden model of a
Let me
piano.
set it down and I'll get the box out of here.
I see gears inside. Gear systems. I wonder, can you actually? There's people probably screaming in the chat at us.
Probably.
Like you don't even know how
Okay,
to
so
hold it or use
Let
it.
me see if I can get it in frame here. Can you guys see that in that camera?
Mystic Melody.
This looks like, I was just talking about printing taking too long. This looks like it would take quite a while to put together.
I wonder how people
So it's
put
laser
these together.
cut, right? It's laser.
I think yeah, it comes laser cut. Yeah, it reminds me of those ships people build in bottles.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're gonna make.
So our coworker Z, who works upstairs,
Yeah.
Sarah Zuckerman. Some of you have heard, but probably not seen on camera because has an aversion to being on camera. Lovely person. I think she builds these, right? Because I've seen these on her desk. So this probably came off of her desk, I'm guessing, upstairs. But I've seen them around her area, and I think she's got like a bunch of them, I think.
Yeah, let us know in the chat if you're into building. Oh wait.
Oh, I missed that.
Oh, play some music. Let me round it up a little bit more.
Don't wind it too much. It'll be going in the background for
know.
the rest of the episode. That's really cool. I like that.
Okay, we are back with some new features here in 2025 FD03. I think I still heard the yeah, it was like one last. Okay, so this one, drawing stamping. Doing a lot with drawing stamping. You can automatically stamp your SolidWorks drawings with extended attributes indicating approvals, such as associated usernames and email addresses. This helps ensure stakeholders involved in the release process can be easily identified and, if needed, contacted. So this probably looks very familiar to an enhancement that we show whereby via a change in the maturity of the document, we're showing drawings in this case, we're getting stamping onto the SolidWorks drawing. So in the previous example with the previous FD, we showed a name, so name getting stamped. And now we're able to stamp usernames as well as email addresses onto the drawing. So drawing stamping, to be clear, is something that, like, ever since I first saw a title block on a drawing, there have been spots for, and maybe we don't call it stamping necessarily, but just to indicate approvals and dates of approvals of a given manufacturing drawing, right? We're just basically adding more properties, more metadata that corresponds to the approvals to be stamped now onto the drawing if you choose to. The email address thing is interesting because, again, it just makes it a little bit easier to contact someone just in case you had a question or need to know who did the approval and when. And I've said this before within the previous FDs where we showed drawing stamping, but tying it directly to the process just makes me happy as someone who likes process management, right? And it's really interesting in this case because it isn't always the case that the person who is doing the approving has a seat of SOLIDWORKS, and they don't even necessarily have to have one now. So you would see in the vignette that we have a web viewer called 3D Play. If you have cloud services, if you manage your designs or kind of share your designs on 3D Experience, 3D Play is just like a viewer web app. You don't have to install anything. It's just there. You can use it on your iPad or, again, your PC, using Google Chrome or any other browser. Yep. And so it just stamps it to where if you open it in SOLIDWORKS, the stamping is there. It's obvious that it's tied to the approval. So it stamps the appropriate name there or email address. And it just makes it much closer tied to the process, which I like.
Yeah, I agree. And we just improved the process of setting up those links. FD02, right? We had the ability to take a look at those visually while on the drawing, and in fact, I think Mike did the demo for that too, and he put it on his mouse gestures. So you could just swipe and see what all the links are for that, and swipe and they hide again, which I thought was a really nice way to do it. If you do anything like that on a regular basis, or you're trying to monitor things like this and make sure all of that information is getting propagated, keep track of all those links really quickly and easily.
And that was 7 or 8 weeks ago.
7 or 8 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
Once again, I mean, for those of you who are new to SOLIDWORKS overall, just as a refresher, we used to come out with net new features basically once a year.
Yeah.
So once a year, September, October range, the exact date would vary. You would get the new release of that year's SOLIDWORKS. Every subsequent release, that Service Pack, 1, Service Pack 2, Service Pack 3 would just have bug and performance fixes.
Yeah.
But now, once again, every 7 or 8 weeks, there's a whole bulk of new features. So yeah, that was 7 or 8 weeks ago. It feels like forever ago.
It does. Yeah. When I said it, I even questioned. I was like, was that last show or no? I guess it was.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
So I think we have it showing here. It's display. I think we labeled it display expressions for drawings. So even if you're not using the sort of process mapped way of stamping drawings as we've been demonstrating here, you can still use that if you're someone that manages the title block for sure.
Yeah, good point. One of the things I enjoy about doing this show is being able to kind of like string those together. It's nice. Nice to have a spot where you and I can talk about it, where it's like, okay, this connects to this, and this is part of this project. Even just for myself to link things together.
Yeah, having done this is now the third one. There are many languages that I think we've been exploring for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so we're gonna stay on drawings. What's this next one, Jesse?
Yeah. So now we have the option to exclude drawings. Now that we've got them all set up, get rid of them. So in Export Package tool, we now allow you to choose drawings to include or exclude. This helps reduce the package size by skipping unnecessary files, letting you share only relevant information. Okay, so this is for export package. So maybe just to back up a step.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, what is export package? Some of you may or may not be familiar with that. So export package is like a pack and go in the sense that you're bundling up a bunch of files. And the way that I like to think about it is a pack and go just for your platform stuff. So if you're storing your data, Sean, you just mentioned if you have cloud services or if you're using 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS, all of that data is linked to the platform. Obviously, that's how you're keeping track of everything. A pack and go will just make a separate zip file that goes off into the ether, right? And you can then manually try to deal with that after the fact. Export package is a way that you can manage that information and keep it in sync with the platform. So you can send out a package, bring it back, and it will have information. Okay, this is what's changed. Do you want to bring it back into the platform? So if you're using the platform to store or manage your data, this is a great way to send stuff to somebody. If they make any changes or whatever, you can send it back. Now we're allowing you to choose whether you want to include or exclude certain information, in this case drawings. Sometimes you've got a bunch of drawings that go with something that the person you're sending it to just doesn't need. So there's no reason to send them, and furthermore, you might not want them to even have access to them for certain reasons anyway. So at this point, you can say, nope, don't need these, don't need to add to the file size, or they don't need to have access to them. We can exclude them from the process, but still use the packaging system to send it and receive it. So a nice little update there that you can choose with more granularity, at least, what it is you want to send somebody if you're storing your data on the platform.
Sure. I think another thing to mention here is the workflow in the demo, particularly towards the end, where you see someone in this sort of example case taking that package that's been exported by someone who's probably managing revisions and actually working with a team inside of SOLIDWORKS connected to 3D Experience to kind of manage all that for them. And then you see someone who's importing the package, and they're importing it to a storage drive, basically, a cloud storage drive. And so they don't necessarily have to be mapped to your cloud, basically, your version of the cloud and your company's space. They can work on it and then kind of repackage it, send it back. And keep in mind, more and more now, right? Each purchase of SOLIDWORKS comes with cloud services.
Yep.
We have a lot of people using 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS as well, which is basically with the add-in sort of embedded, the connector embedded. And so you can, with confidence, start to look to use these features because, once again, many of us have it now. And so,
all of us, essentially.
Yeah, right? So
a few cases that you wouldn't have access to it.
And I say that because, reflexively, and this might have been the case a year ago even, or 2 years ago, to where you're thinking, I might have the SOLIDWORKS connector installed. We might manage our data in the cloud. There's no foreseeable way that I'd ever send this to anyone because not a lot of people are using this that I know of.
Right.
Well, a lot of people, again, practically all of us now, we have it. So even if it's a case where maybe you don't know that someone's using it, but you know they use SOLIDWORKS, this might be an opportunity to say to them, hey, I have all of my revisions mapped and all my permissions mapped, and we can just not worry about that. We don't have to communicate on that at all. You don't have to guess. It's not just like raw file data.
Yeah.
You can just import the package as is, and it's a much simpler way for us to work together, again, if it's a contractor, outside vendor, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's absolutely a great point. If you've been curious about using the platform as your system of managing, but you do work with a lot of people who aren't, this is a great way to handle that. You can really sidestep that whole anxiety because they don't have to be using it for you to take advantage of it.
So this is another area where we've enhanced things when it comes to areas where you're managing your data or your projects using 3D Experience. And we talked about large assemblies earlier in the episode, right, with Selective Open. But now we're just talking about sort of raw performance in session. So again, particularly targeted towards large assemblies. So this enhancement that we're about to go through to the SOLIDWORKS connector, which is the little add-in that shows up for 3D Experience inside of SOLIDWORKS, it gives users more control over how much collaborative metadata, like if the file has an owner or who it's locked by, how much of that loads right away, specifically within that task pane area. So by default, everything used to load all at once, even though it wasn't necessary on demand for the vast majority of our projects. And now you can collapse it and load the metadata only as needed, which speeds things up significantly for large designs. So if you're watching the vignette, essentially it's as is, as we had in the solid spot, where the default behavior still today is you can have it to where it is expanding everything. So you picture you have, let's say, an assembly tree at the top level that has 8 sub-assemblies, maybe a couple parts at the top level. Well, all of the sub-assembly components would also have their metadata, such as, is this component locked? Which revision is it? What's the maturity state of it? Who is it locked by? You don't necessarily need to be seeing all that or refreshing all of it or have the server like constantly checking on that all the time. So you can now, switch an option here, as we show in the vignette, to where those items are collapsed and they're not shown or readily loaded in by default all the time. This gets back to what we were talking about earlier with lazy loading, right? Where a lot of times when you have a top level assembly, especially with larger assemblies, this becomes more of a concern or just more of a topic of interest. You don't necessarily need all that sub-component level stuff, like your sub-assemblies, their parts, etc., to be all that information to be loaded in. This is somewhat reminiscent, actually, of a sort of generalized assembly modeling enhancement that we displayed. I think it was last FD02 it came out, where you're now able to disable auto resolve of components when you expand the tree.
Yep. Took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
So can you talk more about that one?
Yeah. So essentially, I guess it's more similar to having the functionality turned on, right? So the auto resolve. So if you open an assembly in lightweight mode, right? Lightweight mode does exactly what we're talking about. This is the equivalent of lightweight mode, but just for metadata, essentially, right? So lightweight mode will not load everything in every part in your entire assembly. So it's like the next step up from large design review mode, right? Lightweight gives you more than large design review mode does, but still not fully resolved. Now that's a nice benefit if you have auto resolve turned on, because as you go digging through the tree, then it starts loading everything underneath. So it's basically selective. As you choose, I need information on this, boom, then it will then load, and then it will load. So it basically just takes whatever's in the top level, loads that, and then as you investigate the tree, it will start loading the information in the parts. This does exactly the same thing, at least to my understanding, but just in the My Sessions pane with metadata. So same technique, basically, from what I can tell.
Yeah, essentially. But once again, I think big takeaway is with larger data sets, SOLIDWORKS is utilizing in several arenas more of a lazy loading methodology, which I think more so matches how we tend to work with those sorts of file sets.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously this is geared towards large assemblies too, right? So if you've got a ton of data, that's when it's going to take the longest to load. But in those cases, you've got tons of data. I would say probably the majority of the data you're not using, right? You're not accessing until you need to access it. So it just makes sense to only load it when you need to go look at it, because most of the stuff in there you're not using right at that point in time.
Yep, 100%. Speaking of files, what about deleting files?
Deleting files. Yeah, we can delete files. So let me read the blurb here for this one. So previously, you could only delete document objects from collaborative spaces, but now the delete command is always available, letting you remove any object type. You'll get confirmation on prompt, and messages will guide you based on your permissions and the object's maturity state. So deleting files, we can remove files essentially with convenience now, right? So deleting files is now more available. And frankly, there was a bit of pushback on even adding this in, right? Because with something like the platform, you're always trying to keep track of your data. Just blowing it away can be risky, right? So the option is now more available to remove files, mostly just for cleanup purposes, right? You and I, we do a lot of testing, and I imagine in a lot of scenarios, early phases of design, you're doing a lot of testing. You want to load that stuff into the platform, obviously, as you're storing your data where you store everything else. Then you end up not needing a lot of stuff. It's good to be able to just remove it, clear it out of there, stuff that you don't need to track, and keep an eye on. File hygiene. I saw you put in the sheet. It's honestly a great way to state that, as you often do. But yeah, file hygiene is a good way to reference this addition, and obviously just expanded capabilities of being able to access that ability to just clean things up wherever you are. And
there's a lot to say about that. I mean, I think so. At a glance, you might look at something like this and think, oh, deleting files off of a space that is mine. That should be really easy. I should be able to do it all the time, whenever I want, however I want. But like, if you take a step back and think about why most people are using any sort of PDM system or anything that just tracks your file usage and manages it to some degree for you and your team, you will quickly think of scenarios where you wouldn't want that to happen. In this vignette, you see a couple examples actually where that's the case. For example, we talk a lot about file access rights, and we talk about network storage drives, where that's like the wild, wild west of file access. Well, with 3D Experience or something like SOLIDWORKS PDM, any of those sort of file management systems that you would use with CAD, you do have that as a factor to take into consideration. Namely, the system is taking it into consideration for you.
Right.
And so you do get these messages, errors, warnings that pop up in cases where you don't have the access rights to delete a file. It tells you why. It tells you if the file is locked. It tells you if the file has references. These are all things that if you're using a network storage drive, a Google Drive, whatever it is, that isn't built for file reference handling, for access
Specifically CAD.
for CAD,
Yeah.
especially. It isn't going to do that, and you're going to delete stuff. And next time you open it in SolidWorks, like an assembly or a drawing referencing a component, files are missing. I don't know where they went, etc. So while it has, like you said, become easier, we've made this sort of destroy command. It's still giving you those messages and alerts where I think it appropriately should.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think from a user level, you think, well, I should just be able to delete anything I want.
My files.
Right.
Yeah.
From an organizational level, you
Yeah.
think, I don't want people deleting anything that they want. So this is a nice sweet spot. Like you say, it because it's tracking all of the information that any other system really doesn't, it gives you a nice in-between saying, okay, well, did you think about this, that, and the other thing before you go deleting this? Oops, no, I didn't. I don't want to delete that. Or, this was just a test file, essentially, and it can go.
Yeah, and for some background, I think on the app or the interface that we're seeing here on the demo or the vignette here on the clip, this is namely an area called 3D space, which is kind of like your drive area.
Yeah.
Like this is where all your stuff is,
Yep.
Just in its sort of raw state. There is an app or a sort of interface you can access within the browser that's called Collaborative Lifecycle, which is pretty similar. It just gives more lifecycle information and focuses on the lifecycle of the file or the project. There, it's pretty easy, or a lot easier, and a lot more evident to move files. Now, the reason I bring this up is because this delete command is a true, as it says on the message, this is a true destroy. Like, it's gone. This is not a recycle bin.
Right.
So it doesn't send it to a recycle bin by default. You can make another space, and you can, using the Collaborative Lifecycle app, like move it to like sort of your garbage bin area if you're not sure whether you want to just get rid of the project altogether forever.
Yeah.
There are other means, obviously, of backing some data up, like model data if you want. You copy to a local disk, whatever you want to do. But I did want to mention that just while we're on the topic.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it is a little bit different working with like an object-based system than just in your Windows Explorers too, right? We do a lot more browsing in a folder-based system than you tend to do in or on the platform. Now, we have bookmarks, right? So you can put things in something that feels like a folder, but they have benefits, right? Because the object isn't actually in the folder. It's stored in the space, as you said. So your bookmark is appropriately named. It isn't a folder. The file isn't in there. It's just an easy way for you to find it, which I've come to really, really enjoy.
It's just like your browser, right?
Yeah.
It's like the website is not stored
Exactly.
in your bookmark folder.
Exactly.
It is just referenced there.
And when I first used it, I was like, this is kind of weird. Why don't you just make it a folder? But now that I've used it, I really appreciate this way of working because you've got so much more searchability. You can browse if you want to browse. You can search if you want to search. You can use your tags. There's a lot more flexibility with that. That being said, all of the information that's in your space, you don't necessarily have to see. So I don't really, unless you're running out of space on your drive, I don't really see a huge detriment of leaving something that you're unsure of. You can leave it in the space. If it's not saved in your bookmarks, you don't need to see it unless you go actually manually searching for it to find it. It can stay there really without consequence. So I think it is a little bit different of a mindset in that you don't have to delete things unless, like I said, you're running out of space. They're out of your way. You really only have access to the stuff that you want to have access to. So that there is that nicety of working with a system like the platform.
Yeah, and it's unlike if you're just working on network storage, you said, hey, if you're not using it, you just leave it there.
Yeah.
Well, that's not always the case with network storage. You don't know who's using what, who's accessing it, changing it, who changed it, if someone's left the company. This is real stuff, as you guys all know.
Yeah.
So yeah, this just you can lock all the projects that you don't want to have changed or move them to a frozen state.
Yep.
So it's just
Which
a lot easier.
would then block our deleting and things like that.
Exactly.
Too. So,
yeah.
Lots of extra control.
A lot of control. So speaking of the 3D Experience add-in, or the connector for SolidWorks, what's this one here?
With the 3D Experience Cloud services, you can now install the SolidWorks Collaborative Designer connector directly from the 3D Experience Marketplace, right within SolidWorks. No need to open a separate window or follow external instructions, just faster, more seamless setup. I don't know if I read that correctly or understood any of that correctly, but we had the connector. All right, so let's talk about the connector real quick. So the connector is what we've been talking about a handful of times throughout this episode, which is essentially the pane on the right-hand side of your software where you would get the My Sessions pane, all of the information that connects your SolidWorks data to what's going on the platform side, right? So it's basically your tree, but your platform tree. So adding that into the software, that connection from your SolidWorks into the platform side of things is what we're talking about installing. Normally you would do that from the platform itself, right? You just log in your browser, you see all of the stuff that's available to you, you can click and install. You don't have to do that anymore. So we have the marketplace add-in that's on. I think it's on by default, right?
It is installed by default, I believe, but I don't believe it is
it's not on by default.
default.
Okay. So that add-in you have available to you unless you choose to not install it, manually when you're installing.
Yeah, and
you'll see it in there.
it just to tell you guys, I mean, in the vignette you see this obviously, but you just go to tools. If you don't spend much time turning add-ins on or off, or even looking at the ones you have, you just go to tools and add-ins, and it's like we're saying, it's just a checkbox.
Yeah,
checkbox to turn it on for the session, or a checkbox to turn it on when SolidWorks starts up whenever. So yeah, you just turn that on.
Yeah, good point. So through that add-in, you can also install the connector there. So I guess the assumption here is that you would probably have the marketplace turned on if you're fishing around for things in there. You don't need to leave SolidWorks to install the connector for SolidWorks, which is a nicety. I think, in terms of us bringing this up on the show, obviously it's good to know where to install things.
Sure.
That's always helpful.
We tell you a lot about how to use things that are installed.
Right. Yeah. It is good to know how to get it.
Yeah.
But it is nice that you don't have to leave SolidWorks to turn it on if you do want to use that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, just to bring up the connector itself,
sure.
and we've ended up talking about it quite a few times already on the show. But yeah, cloud services, as we've said, is something that virtually everyone has access to at this point. So this is the connector part of it, which is how you would then save your data to the platform. But there's a whole lot more to it, right? We talked about the package, sending that package out. You can just share files in general, right? You can send a file to somebody. They can open it up right in their browser. All they need to do is log in. They can mark up. They can send you information back. All of that functionality is built into cloud services. Obviously, storing your data, managing your data on the platform. So I think it's easy to forget that all of that stuff is essentially available to anyone. Any seat that you purchase at this point has cloud services included, and unless you have an old version of subscription that you haven't updated, you would have access to it.
And to be clear, I mean, a lot of us are getting emails that say, "Hey, your platform's ready." So that's what would happen. You would get an email that says your platform's ready, post purchase, let's say of SolidWorks with cloud services, which again, it's included with SolidWorks these days. So a lot of us have probably gotten an email.
Yeah.
Maybe thought like, what is my platform? What is this?
Right.
I have no idea what you're talking about. That's what we're talking about. It's literally this space with the storage space available, with the ability to store revisions of your files, work with others, invite others. This isn't like, we're not talking about the only way, the first way ever to install the add-in.
Yeah.
If you log into that space, once you get that email, and you start inviting users on, basically your coworkers or your team, you're given an area that's basically just a website. And then you go on and we can show it now, where you would traditionally just click install on an area of the welcome pane that says design with SolidWorks. So that was there, but that was a website, some website you would use in Google Chrome, just like any other website. But yeah, but I guess this alternative means of just installing the add-in. Yeah, check it out. I mean, 3D Experience Marketplace is not, for any purposes of this show, something we've really talked about.
No, it isn't.
I think we're kind of almost consolidating where you would get 3D Experience connected sort of assets or software. So, right, we're talking about the SolidWorks connector, getting it through the 3D Experience Marketplace add-in. But the 3D Experience Marketplace add-in, we talked about, it's there. What was it there for, right? You could find suppliers, different supplier parts, different potential service providers. So once again, I think in a way we're sort of consolidating where not only you get 3D Experience related software for SolidWorks, like the connector, but also just different assets that are served through the sort of broader network that we're creating. So you might never use this, you might never check it out, but at least I think holistically it starts to make a lot of these maybe seemingly disparate things sort of coalesce a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree. And if you hadn't been convinced to give cloud services a try. Now with Selective Open,
Yeah, it's affecting your modeling
that
experience
sweetens the deal.
in like some really positive ways.
It honestly does sweeten the deal.
It's
pretty
just
cool.
it's just like auto generate drawings. Like just try it. You
Right.
have it. Just try it.
Try it.
Cool.
Nice.
All right, it is now time to go back in time with the roll the tape feature flashback of the day. Save as previous release, which feels like a really old enhancement. But Jesse, do you know when we introduced this? Do you remember?
Boy. It has been 2 years.
What does that mean? Like which major release are you
So
saying?
I say I'll say 22.
No. See, it's so we're just releasing new stuff all the time now, so it feels like this is really old. It was 2024.
24. Really?
I believe so.
Oh man.
Yeah, I believe it was 2024.
We are in a weird time warp.
Yeah.
Now because we've gotten we get 5 releases
I could be,
a year.
I'm 99. I'm like I'll say 95. 95% sure it was 2024.
I was going to say 23, but man, yeah, it could be. I mean, I guess 2 years back from we're now just about into the 26th release, so we'll say I was right.
I mean, yeah, because again, we're just releasing new features all the time now, so it just
24.
again weird time warp.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Let's see. What was the 24 release? We had Bowhead that year.
Bowhead Corporation, adaptive off-road bicycles. Check them out.
Yeah, I think that does sound right now. The more you say it.
Yeah, I have the craziest libraries on my computer. Like if you're a SOLIDWORKS nerd, you would love my libraries of just different clips. So that's exactly how it's like. Oh, let me go to my 2024 treasure trove with Bowhead.
Yeah.
So yeah, this I think a lot of people still don't know about this. I still give user group presentations where I'm still explaining what this is and that it is available, and people are like, wait, what? Can you do parts, assemblies?
Yeah.
What about drawings? And you can.
You can.
Yes.
And furthermore, it works with Pack and Go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just did that like a week ago because, as I've mentioned several times, we're working on the data set for 2026 release. And often at that point, we're going back and forth, testing things in a couple of different versions. And I needed to go backwards for a second to test something out. Pack and Go, took the whole thing, whoop, back a version.
So
beautiful.
Pack and Go is great. Obviously, for assemblies and drawings, you want to take the whole package of the file set, right? All the reference components, everything like that. It's great for this one particularly because, as you see in the vignette we're showing, this is a drawing. But if I just do save as on the drawing, this isn't useless. There are reasons why you might want to do this.
Sure.
You can still open a drawing even if you don't have all of its reference components. So like if, let's say somebody had, let's say in this case, you're using 2024 as your kind of primary day-to-day SOLIDWORKS version. Let's say you save it out as a 2022 file. They can still open it. They can view the drawing.
Yeah.
They aren't going to have access to the components and everything. They can still measure, edges in the drawing.
Yes.
That kind of thing. Annotate as well. So a lot of reasons you would do that. You do have the include all reference components checkbox whenever you do save as. But with Pack and Go, it's practically it's inherent, right?
Yep.
So that's a great point to add on, I think, to this one. But yeah, it goes 2 major releases back. Mm-hmm. It is a save as.
Yep.
So basically, you're saving a new copy of the file or files when you do it. But yeah, it's been around. It's been around, and yeah, I mean, if you don't watch stuff like this, and this is why I recommend share this episode if you can, because with your colleagues or on your social networks, whatever. Because if you're not watching stuff like this, it's so easy to miss. Like you'd have to go to save as, type in, look
and forget.
for, yeah, and forget as well. Yeah,
I almost forgot about it the other day when I went to need it. I was like, oh, hold on, I can just, I can just Pack and Go this backwards.
That's what this is for.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So yeah, that is our feature flashback of the day.
That's a good one. That was a great enhancement, and it remains a great enhancement.
Yes. All right, so let's get back into some really new stuff here as of July of 2025 with the FD03 release of SOLIDWORKS 2025. So what we're seeing here is an enhancement to CircuitWorks Libraries. So you might be wondering, and this was brand new as of 2025, this change, wherein CircuitWorks, the add-in, became available to all SOLIDWORKS users on subscription. So essentially what CircuitWorks does, probably does a bit more than this, but I think what it's best known for is essentially taking in PCB data, and typically that's 2D data, and then mapping that to 3D component sets that are then imported directionally into SOLIDWORKS CAD, so that you can have a full-on PCB representation within SOLIDWORKS.
Yeah.
So now, again, look out for that in your add-ins pane. Tools add-ins might be there. Check it out. A lot of help documentation and other resources online if you're interested. The enhancement here, however, let's read the solid spot for CircuitWorks Libraries. You can now keep your CircuitWorks libraries up to date by syncing component data between SOLIDWORKS and 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS seats or licenses. This ensures a single source of truth so your entire team stays aligned with the latest library updates. So the libraries are basically component libraries, and you can do this by a button click. So picture elements of a PCB, right? You have pin connectors, different pads, a lot of different types of components. Essentially, and you can see a PCB representation here on the screen if you're watching. But essentially, this is just making sure that all the component data, inclusive of its properties, the types of component data that's accessible, is mutually accessible in the same sort of form between all the different types of users you might have.
Yep.
Some of you might be using SOLIDWORKS with cloud services. Others might be using 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS, which these days ensures basically that all the stuff that we're talking about, you will readily have access to because SOLIDWORKS is trying to auto-update for you. So yeah, I think in terms of the relevancy here, once again, a lot more of us have cloud services. 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS is more commonly purchased than ever. And we all, if we're on subscription, have CircuitWorks these days, which is a huge change. So this is a very relevant enhancement now.
That's cool. It occurs to me that this is probably also a nice use case for Selective Open, making enclosures and things like that.
Oh,
to
yeah.
surround these, actually get the
I
physical
had not
parts
thought
in,
of that.
and then you're looking at all the surrounding parts to make the enclosures for that. That's kind of a nice way to do it. You can, you're actually getting physical geometry here if you're using CircuitWorks.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of the nice aspect. So combine those two features together, and that's a nice way to work.
I love looking at PCBs.
Yeah.
They're so neat.
Yeah, it's smoke and mirrors to me. I don't understand what I wish I could design them, but I have zero knowledge.
Yeah,
of
you have to pick. Obviously, like we can all relate to this. You kind of have to pick in terms of what you specialize in and what you pay attention to.
Yeah.
But like in a different life, I would love to.
Yeah,
I would love to do that.
Same. It looks really cool.
Cool. So let's move on to a sort of related arena with cable lengths. So there's a change now, and we'll talk about the different packages that sort of feature this in a moment, but you can very easily make wiring and cabling in SOLIDWORKS using SOLIDWORKS routing. The change here is in terms of how cable length and wire length is calculated inside of SOLIDWORKS and the options therein. So you can now report the total routed cable or wire length of wires or cables in your bill of materials tables, even if these wires are used in separate subassemblies. This works in parts only and flattened BOMs, as well as indented BOMs via the right mouse menu, combine identical components. So it's not that you couldn't get wire length, before. It's just that you have sort of greater flexibility in terms of how it's represented in BOMs of any type, right?
Yeah.
So before, let's say you had a wire or a cable of a given type. It would show as two separate, just like we're highlighting here, two separate line items in a bill of materials tree. Now we know within bill of materials and within assembly representative assembly structures, you can have multiple subassemblies, and those subassemblies can have the same wire or cable type, right? Those would then show as basically the same identical wire, same identical cable, but just of different lengths. Now you have an option through that, right mouse button menu, combine identical components in the BOM to essentially, even across subassemblies, if they're in different subassemblies, but they're the same wire cable type, combine those.
That's really nice.
Kind of squash them into, so now you just have, sort of, the considered quantity is taken into account, as well as, just like we say here, the length of that cable or that wire.
So I would imagine, and again, this is not my wheelhouse, but I would imagine the process before was to export this and then manually combine things to figure out how much wire you needed to order and yada yada yada, where now you can just do it in one shot.
Yeah, you'd have to pull something there like that's just unnatural.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you could hide, just do something weird, like hide one of the rows and then and then start doing some weird stuff.
Yeah, and then you're breaking all
You're
your
just breaking
links
stuff.
and-
Yeah, it's like if you start making SolidWorks, the more sort of parametric linkages you're taking away from SolidWorks, you're just not using it the way that it is supposed to be used. And maybe you had to do that because we didn't give you the option. That's kind of our fault in a way.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. As of this July with FD03. So yeah, that's a huge one if you're working with wires or
very
cables
cool.
potentially. All right, so we got another one on the wire and cables front, right?
Yeah, we do. Speaking of clarity when it comes to wiring, we have some more visual clarity as well. So in complex routes, it may be difficult to visualize the effects of a splice on a component. Now, SolidWorks highlights the affected connectors and wires to make it easier for designers to make the correct selection. So wiring is all just a rat's nest as far as I'm concerned. Every time I look at a wiring loom, I'm like, I don't know where any of this goes. And you kind of had the same problem before in SolidWorks too. Now, granted, you can kind of spin the thing around infinitely in SolidWorks, so you have an advantage over real life in that you can zoom in and zoom out and spin around. But it is still kind of hard to see what goes to what. And in this case, when you're adding in splices, making sure you're splicing the right wire would obviously be very important. We now have some extra visual clarity there in that it highlights the whole run that you're actually splicing, so you can make sure that you're getting the right one rather than potentially misclicking and then figuring out you got the wrong one when you go to look around and realize you've got to go back and try to fix that. So make sure you get it right the first time, and that makes a whole lot of sense to me. Now, this does require a from to list to make this work because that's how it traces the wires back to my understanding. So
we should mention at a licensing level, we've talked about this with cloud services. Of course, all of us have it, right, with SolidWorks purchases today. This is in SolidWorks routing, which I think I mentioned. Big thing, though, is that SolidWorks routing is included with SolidWorks Premium. So if you have SolidWorks Premium, you have SolidWorks routing. We've talked about wiring, cabling, we have piping, tubing included as well. So that's all included there. But yeah, routing's definitely been getting some love, I would say, over the grand landscape of 2025.
Yeah, it has. It's a great system for a very complex task. So there is always a lot to work on there because it's a very difficult thing to try to do in 3D space, but it will generally save you a ton of time if it applies to you.
All right, so we also have an enhancement when it comes to wires in terms of searching attributes of wires. So what do I mean by that? Well, previously, electrical attributes property manager, basically the left-hand side, whenever you look at a given route's its properties, such as its color, the cable diameter, whatever it is, we have a property manager that gives you the ability to look at all that. But key here with wires is we didn't have a search function inside of it. So if you had, basically you'd have to manually browse to find specific wires, which could take a long time given large projects. But with embedded search, it's now much easier. So I should mention as well, we kind of shortcutted it a little bit in the solid spot, but the electrical attributes area isn't necessarily new, but what is new is that on the command manager it now has a button. So you can select that, and then as you can see here, if you're watching the vignette on YouTube, you can filter not only by the general name or type of the wire, but also through its several properties or attributes. So here we're giving a very basic example of just searching based on color, but color is important, right? Obviously, that's a very sort of high-level designation of a given wire or cable.
Yep.
You can also search based on other characteristics as well. So we're just making it easier. Overall, user experience, user friendliness, and once again, if you have a project potentially like the one for 2026, the What's New 2026 dataset and customer, I'm sure they might be very happy about that. But enough about that. We can only tease it. We can't tell you who the feature customer is just yet. We'll do that soon. But yeah, Jesse, that's that.
Yeah, that's the whole show. 15. Did we do 15? I wasn't counting.
Yeah, we did 15. Don't count. Yeah, don't fact check me on that, but I believe it was exactly 15. So in closing, though, once again, this is one way to take in the new enhancements, of course. But where else can we go to get information about SOLIDWORKS enhancements?
Yeah, well, obviously we have the website. We're always releasing video. Our team makes demo videos for all of these, which you've seen if you're watching this show with us. But we have also solidworks.com/delivery, right? That you can go to. That has kind of a rolling update, essentially, of what's going on with those FDs. So that's my favorite place, actually, to go check on stuff. I think FD03 is up there already, I think. So basically, as they go, you can just go to that one site. It's easy to remember because you're all fans of Delivery Day. So solidworks.com/delivery. And then you can kind of get a quick recap, basically, of each enhancement at the FD level as you're going. So great place. That's where I like to go to keep tabs on things that have already been gone live. So yeah,
Bookmark it. Make it your homepage.
There you go.
Like I have, and all of my family and friends. Yeah, Jesse, thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Ian, thank you all, and we will talk to you soon.